Okay, get ready for this, right? It's called the Spanish Amityville. We're going deep on this one. First-hand accounts, local legends, even some scientific investigations, all centered around this, like, totally normal-looking house. In rural Spain, no less.
And the location is really interesting. Verges. It's this picturesque little town in Catalonia, known for agriculture, not really, ghost stories.
Well, except for that whole Danza de la Muerte thing, right?
Ah, right, yes.
Every year they dress up as skeletons for this, like, centuries-old procession. Definitely sets a certain mood, don't you think?
It does. It does. It's interesting. Verges has this this kind of complicated relationship with death. On the one hand, it's very much a part of their traditions,
Yeah.
They acknowledge, even celebrate it. But then on the other hand, this is a town that seems to have seen a lot of death and suffering throughout its history.
Yeah, and right at the center of it all is this house, Summer Rental. Became ground zero for some seriously strange events. This is where we meet the Fontana family, just looking for a nice, relaxing getaway. And they ended up with, well, let's just say they got more than they bargained for.
They really did. They described all kinds of experiences.
Yeah.
From like subtle things that just make you uneasy to full-on terrifying stuff. It started with weird sounds at night. Knocking, sounds like chains dragging, feeling like furniture was being moved.
Okay, I can already feel the chills.
And then, there were these awful smells, especially this stench of decay, like really strong. And it was always strongest in this one particular room.
I read that they tried everything to get rid of it, cleaning, airing it out, everything, but nothing worked, almost like it was baked into the house itself. It's funny how our sense of smell can be so powerful.
Oh, absolutely.
So tied right into our memories and emotions.
It really is.
So to hear them describe this awful smell,
Right.
it just adds this whole other level of creepy to it.
Oh, absolutely. It's visceral. But the smells, the sounds, that was just the beginning. Things escalated. It got to the point where they were experiencing physical interaction.
Physical interaction.
Yeah, like there were reports of the grandmother being pushed down the stairs.
Pushed down the stairs? By what?
That's the thing, by something they couldn't see.
Okay, now that's just not right. And I think I even read something about the family dog being thrown down the stairs too, right?
Yes, you're right.
It's like a common thing in these stories, almost as if animals are picking up on something we're not.
It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Like animals are more in tune with whatever's happening on another plane. But it didn't stop there. With the family, they reported objects moving on their own. A face pressed against a window.
A face.
A terrifying face, they said. Oh, and even someone being slapped. By an unseen entity, of course.
Okay, see, now that's just mean. We're talking way more than just your typical haunted house stuff here. This is next level. So what was it about this house? Was it built on like an ancient burial ground or something?
You're closer than you think. Years later, during some renovations in Verges, they made a chilling discovery. Right beneath the house.
Yeah.
A medieval graveyard.
No way.
Oh, yeah. And not just a few bodies, we're talking over 150 skeletons.
150 skeletons buried under this house. Okay, yeah. I'm not surprised things were so messed up in there.
It's quite a discovery. It definitely adds another layer to the story, wouldn't you say?
Layers, yeah, like a haunted layer cake.
You have to wonder about the energy left behind in a place like that.
Right. All those souls. It's a lot to process.
It is.
And we're not just talking about any random graveyard here, are we?
Exactly. This is where the history gets really interesting. You see, Verges was home to a medieval field hospital for soldiers, many of whom died there and were likely buried right on site.
A field hospital. So we're talking about soldiers, wounded, dying, the suffering,
Exactly.
the trauma.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
All those emotions, all that pain just soaked into the earth.
And potentially influencing the events that unfolded above.
You think maybe the house itself became like a focal point for all that residual energy?
Oh, absolutely. And think about it, a medieval field hospital.
Yeah.
Those were pretty rough places,
Yeah. Not exactly known for their sterile environment.
No, not at all. They were chaotic, unsanitary. Imagine the pain these soldiers endured, the fear. Dying on the battlefield was, well, it was brutal.
Right, so you're thinking that it's not just about the number of deaths, but the intensity of the emotions involved. Right?
Exactly. A lot of paranormal theories talk about how strong emotions, especially negative ones, they can kind of imprint themselves on a place.
Which could explain why the Fontana's experiences were so, so intense. We're not just talking about like a door slamming or feeling a chill.
Right, exactly.
This is physical interactions, apparitions.
And that brings us to another interesting aspect of this case. Marta.
Ah, right, Marta.
The baby girl.
The baby born right there in the house. just as all the weirdness started happening.
It's almost like her arrival. It kind of amplified things.
Okay, yeah, like she was a catalyst or something.
Possibly.
But what is it about newborns and, the other side?
Well, there's this idea that newborns, being so new to our world, they might be more sensitive to the spirit world.
More sensitive? How so?
Like they can sense things, see things that we, as we get older, we lose that connection.
So you're saying that maybe Marta was like a conduit?
Some people believe that, yes, that babies can act as a kind of bridge between the living and the dead.
Okay, that's both fascinating and a little creepy.
It is, isn't it?
Poor kid.
But again, no scientific evidence to back it up. It's just one of those theories.
Right, but it makes you wonder, doesn't it? So let's see, we've got a house built on top of a medieval graveyard,
Right.
full of restless spirits, potentially. We've got this baby who might be sensitive to the paranormal. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
It's a lot to unpack. But remember we mentioned some of the source material includes actual paranormal investigators.
Oh yeah, tell me about that.
They went in with EMF readers and everything.
EMF readers. Okay, so we're not just talking about like Ouija boards and seances here. Break that down for me.
Right, so EMS stands for electromagnetic field. Basically, these fields are all around us, generated by all sorts of things, appliances, power lines, you name it. And EMF readers, they measure fluctuations in these fields.
Okay, I'm following. But what does that have to do with ghosts?
That's the million-dollar question. Some researchers believe that high or fluctuating EMFs, they can actually have an effect on people.
An effect? Like what?
Some people report feeling anxious, uneasy. Others have even described hallucinations, feeling a presence, even the sensation of being touched.
Whoa, okay. So are we saying that maybe some of what the Fontanas experienced could have been caused by these EMFs?
It's possible. But then again, there are other experiences they describe.
Right, like the voices, the apparitions.
Exactly. EMS can't really explain all of that.
Which brings us back to the big question. Are we dealing with real ghosts here, or is it possible that these experiences, scary as they were, could be explained by something else, something more, down to earth?
It's a puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this case so interesting. We can analyze, we can theorize, but ultimately we're left with more questions than answers.
I like a good mystery.
Don't we all?
But, it makes you think. This whole Dance of Death tradition in Verges, do you think it could have had some kind of influence on what was happening in that house?
It's an interesting thought.
It sounds kind of out there, but...
No, I hear you. There are those who believe that certain rituals, they can create a bridge between our world and the spirit world.
So maybe Verges, with its unique relationship with death, maybe it's created some kind of, thin spot between the veil or something.
It's possible. And even if we ignore the supernatural aspect for a moment, the Dance of Death speaks to a very specific cultural understanding of death in Verges.
Like death is just a part of life.
Exactly. Not something to be feared, but embraced.
Okay, so maybe that plays into it. But what about the house itself? After the Fontanas got out of there, did anyone else ever try to live there?
Well, funny you should ask. According to one source, there was a group of squatters.
Squatters? Seriously?
Yeah, they moved in after the Fontanas left. But apparently they didn't last very long.
Oh no, how long are we talking about here?
A few days, maybe a week at most. Details are scarce. But they left suddenly. Wouldn't say what happened.
Oh, see, now that's just creepy. What could be so bad that you wouldn't even stay in a free house?
Right. It definitely suggests that something wasn't right in that house.
Yeah, something tells me it wasn't just a leaky faucet or a drafty window.
No, this was something else entirely.
So what happens to a place like that? I mean, the article mentioned the house might be in danger of collapsing.
It did, yes.
So what happens to all that energy, all those stories, if the house is gone?
Another good question. Some believe that disturbing burial grounds can have, unforeseen consequences.
Unleash the spirits and all that.
Exactly.
Others say it's more about respect.
Right, that disturbing the dead should be avoided simply out of respect. Not because of some fear of supernatural repercussions.
So no easy answers there.
Not in this case.
It's just striking to me how closely the stories of this house, they're tied to the history of Verges itself.
It's true.
It's like the town's relationship with death. It's kind of played out in the walls of that house.
And isn't that what makes these stories so fascinating?
It really is.
They make us think about the places we inhabit and how those places might shape us.
Or how we shape them.
Precisely.
It's almost like we leave a little piece of ourselves behind, wherever we go.
A footprint in time.
Exactly. And some footprints are just spookier than others.
That's one way to put it.
So after all this, what have we learned?
I think the biggest takeaway is some mysteries can't be solved.
And that's okay.
It's more than okay. It's what keeps things interesting.
I like that. Embrace the unknown. Well, thanks for going down this rabbit hole with me. And for those of you listening, if you ever find yourselves in Verges, Spain, maybe skip the haunted house tours and book a nice, boring hotel room instead. Disturbing burial grounds. You know, I'm not superstitious or anything.
Right.
But there's something about that idea that just, I don't know, it makes me uneasy.
Yeah, I think it taps into a primal fear. This idea of, like, disrespecting the dead and then facing the consequences.
Exactly, like we're messing with forces we don't understand.
Or maybe we shouldn't.
Right. So if this house, this Spanish Amityville, if it really is on the verge of collapse...
Which, according to the article, it is.
Right. What happens to all those stories, all that energy we talked about?
It's a question a lot of people have asked, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
Some believe that if those graves are disturbed, it could release something. Something powerful, maybe even dangerous.
Okay, now we're getting back to the creepy stuff.
It is a bit unsettling, isn't it?
But
then there are others who say it's all about intention. If the graves are treated with respect, if the remains are handled with care, then there's nothing to fear.
So which is it? Respect or fear?
I think it's really a bit of both.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You know, after diving into all of this, the history, the stories, the paranormal investigation...
It's quite a case.
It really is. I'm struck by how connected it all seems.
Connected?
Yeah, like the Spanish Amityville. It's not just some random haunted house. It's like, it's deeply woven into the fabric of Verges itself.
That's an interesting way to put it.
The town's history, its traditions, that whole dance of death thing.
Right.
It's like it's all intertwined, like
Yeah.
the house is a mirror reflecting something deeper.
A reflection of Verges' relationship with death.
Exactly.
And the Fontanas, Marta, even those squatters, they all become part of that story.
They do, don't they? It's like they all got caught in something bigger than themselves.
And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all.
It really is.
The idea that we're all just passing through,
Leaving
our mark on the world, for better or for worse.
Wow, okay. Now that's a thought to end on. Well, listeners, I don't know about you, but I'm suddenly feeling very grateful for my non-haunted, totally ordinary apartment. And maybe a little bit more mindful of the stories these old places hold. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.